The National Anti-Corruption Bureau, an institution that many Ukrainians really hope will be at the forefront of fight against corruption, had chosen the first of the three independent auditors. This is a person, according to whose assessment the head of the bureau could be fired. So the Ukrainian Prime Minister, Volodymyr Hromyskiy, has appointed a Ukrainian lawyer and academic, Mykhailo Buromenskiy. He is the president of the Institute of Applied Humanitarian Research, and he has worked as a legal expert for the European Union, the World Bank, the OSCE, and some other rather prestigious international institutions. However, the law demands that a candidate has, quote, substantial work experience in the law enforcement agencies, prosecutor offices, or courts abroad, or in international organizations, unquote, which made many Ukrainians question the appointment, especially civil society activists. The fact that Mr. Buromenskiy was preferred over many prosecutors that are rather well known in the world is an additional cause for doubt. And as also the fact that Mr. Buromenskiy is member of the Presidential Constitutional Committee of Ukraine, which is headed by Prime Minister Hromyskiy. Tonight in our studio we have an expert of the Transparency International, Oleksandr Kalitenko. Thank you for joining us. Moreover, he is not just an expert, he is an expert for the political analysis at Transparency International. But first, not about the politics, it's about the procedure.
It's about the procedure, the mechanisms.
How, to your mind, to your assessment, Mr. Kalitenko, how close to the procedure the proceedings were?
Actually, there is a risk. There is a risk because Mr. Buromenskiy did not have the experience, the relevant experience in the law enforcement agencies abroad, actually, because he is rather theoretical person. And this is not a common practice for Ukraine to make an audit for law enforcement bodies, such as, for example, police or General Prosecution Office, so on and so forth. So that will be the first audit in Ukraine for the law enforcement body, for the National Anti-Corruption Bureau. And that's why it's extremely important to have such auditors that have such experience, because there are no procedure in the law how exactly this audit should be concluded, because this audit will be for the first time and there is no deadline for this audit, and also international candidates such as Martha Boersch, for example, or Robert Storch, or Giovanni Kessler, or that persons obviously were stronger.
All right. As you have mentioned some of the other candidates, let's look at the list of those who sort of competed, although it was not actually a competition, for the position of the auditor. Robert Storch is the deputy head of the U.S. Inspector General's office in the Department of Justice. He began working as an attorney in the Public Integrity section of the DOJ Criminal Division and has held various roles within the organization, including senior counsel and counsel to the Inspector General. Giovanni Kessler, whom Mr. Kalitenko also mentioned, is an Italian prosecutor nominated by the European Commission at the request of civil society. Mr. Kalitenko didn't mention another rather interesting candidate, who is Carlos Castresans, and he is a Spanish prosecutor and the former head of the UN International Committee Against Impunity in Guatemala. He revealed high-level corruption in this Latin American country and brought to account ex-president Alfonso Portillo. He has been to Ukraine many times and acted as an advisor to Ukrainian law enforcement body. However, there's another very interesting candidate whom Mr. Kalitenko did mention, and this is Martha Boersch, an American prosecutor with 30 years of experience, and she specializes in federal criminal defense and complex civil litigation. As a federal prosecutor in the Northern District of California, she served as chief of the Organized Crime Strike Force and chief of the Securities Fraud Unit. Martha Boersch's experience in federal criminal law includes fraud, domestic corruption and bribery, or actually fight against fraud, domestic corruption and bribery, money laundering, and other federal criminal offenses, and she was a prosecutor in the infamous or famous money laundering case of former Ukrainian Prime Minister Pavlo Lazarenko. Do you think that the cabinet of ministers who actually appointed Mr. Buromenskiy has seriously regarded any of the foreign candidates? Or the agenda was from the start to take them to pretend that they are taken into consideration, but still to appoint a Ukrainian?
There were lack of transparency, actually, in the procedure of appointment the auditor by the cabinet of minister. We saw that there were no proper announcement on the website, in the internet. There were no proper announcement for the candidates, for the auditors.
So far, we've been talking about just one of the three auditors. Yes. And there are other two which have to be appointed by whom and how they will cooperate. Will they be able to work together, actually?
One should be appointed by a president, and another should be appointed by the Verkhovna Rada. In anti-corruption committee headed by Mr. Yegor Sobolev, there is an open contest for these auditors, and such candidates like Martha Boersch, for example, or Carlos Castresans are also candidates for the auditors, but appointed by the Verkhovna Rada.
So they have a second chance?
Yes.
But shouldn't we take into account the fact that in many cases the experience gained abroad is hardly applicable in Ukraine? The conditions are so different. And what is seen as a positive feature, the foreign experience, in many cases, and we have examples of this, just does not work in Ukraine.
There was such a situation, but in that case, for example, Ms. Martha Boersch, she is familiar with Ukrainian corruption.
We in Ukraine are very much used to different demos and rallies that react to practically everything that's been done and that's not been done. But in this case, I think the vigor of the protest, the vigor of the public reaction was even higher than in some other no less important cases. Why do you think the civil society has reacted so vigorously to this appointment?
Because, as you have mentioned in the very beginning, the negative audit is the reason to fire Mr. Sitnik as the head of National Anti-Corruption Bureau. And given in mind that NABU is the new anti-corruption body, which is providing already some results, of course, it's critical for fight with corruption to have independent NABU.
And our conversation is interrupted for some time by Skype, where we have Bohdan Kryklyvenko, who is currently the head of the office of the Ukrainian Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights, and he had a chance to work with future Anti-Corruption Bureau Auditor Mr. Buromenskiy. What can you tell us about Mr. Buromenskiy? What was your experience?
Hello, colleagues. We have, during the last few years, very good experience of cooperation with Professor Buromenskiy in different types of cooperation. Just a few months ago, he was a member of our commission established by Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights, Ms. Lutkovska, for the election of the member of High Qualification Commission of Judges. And it was very good and successful experience. Then 2 years ago, also together with Professor Buromenskiy, we realized a very good experiment. Firstly, it was done by our office. It was a project so-called as a external monitoring of the implementation of new criminal procedure code from the point of view of ensuring of human rights in the implementation.
I actually remember that for the first time I heard Professor Buromenskiy's surname in relation to this experiment. That was highly publicized and seems to be a highly successful case. But go on.
We have the good cooperation on the less formal level with Professor Buromenskiy, and I know that all lawyers community know him very well. And what's very important for us, that external commission or how it's called, the auditors for the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, from our point of view, also have to check where with the human rights and fundamental freedoms are they secured during the activities of National Anti-Corruption Bureau.
So has Mr. Kryklyvenko removed some of your concerns?
Actually, no, because there are still no experience for the law enforcement agencies abroad.
Oleksandr Kalitenko, thank you for being on the Sunday show, and we will be back in a second.